Okay, this is my little 10-minute demo of my implementation of the Todomvc to-do app or widget, whatever you want to call it. I can show you how the widget works. It works the same for all the other implementations that are out there, React or Backbone or jQuery or whatever. But I'll show you my version of it, which hopefully does exactly according to the spec. I can add to-do items. Let's say walk dog, make dinner, take out trash, pay bills. So I add these here. I can mark them as completed. I can set them all completed or toggle that off. Notice that it will tell me how many items are left. That's the number of non-completed. I can delete individual ones here, add them back, whatever. I can keep adding later. I can let's go over here, say clear completed. Notice that if I get rid of all of them, this little thing and this bottom footer will disappear. So we'll just have an empty little thing here. Okay. The other thing you should notice here, I'm on the let's make one of these completed and two not completed, so you can see the differences between these different categories. Notice if I go to active, it sets the part after the hash. If I refresh, it notices that I'm still on that hash there and goes into active mode, and it also it'll remember the items I have here. Those are stored in local storage. Just a very quick running through the code to it. You can go to the HTML file. The main parts to look at in the HTML file are this section here, the section ID templates, which is not displayed by default. And it has all this HTML code that is delimited by comments. It has these little hash things, has these starting and ending comments. For instance, here's the footer. If I want to write the footer, I have a template named footer because of this. I have a template called to-do widget because of these two comments. I have a template called to-do item because of these two comments. And then within to-do item, I have a property name that's used twice. And I also have, within all of these, I have these data utvars, or uTemplate variables. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me, when I write the string to a file, I can set or actually when I create the string of these templates, when I call the template function to build the string, I can provide a callback, and in that callback I will get access to these individual variables when they're actually created as DOM elements. So that's in the HTML file. It's in a hidden block. It's display none, so this block isn't displayed initially. However, what happens here at the end, we load our JavaScript. We load two components, the widget and the item. The widget is the overall widget, and the item is one of these items here. Those are separate components. They're in separate files. We load those, and then we just do a little thing here. For our test purposes, the way we choose to do this is we get that HTML, or the container that has our templates in it. We load the templates from their HTML. We create a widget. We give it a parameter of to-dos, which is the key name for the data store. So if I put two widgets in here, I give them two different keys, and we can have two different to-do lists, and it should just work. Then finally I render this to a string with widget render, and I send it off to replace element contents, which is a function which will end up, it's like setting inner HTML, but it has the side effect of calling my callbacks that were in the what's returned by widget render here, the string. There are callbacks which were set when we did that, and those will get called. You don't really see it here because we're outside of the main core logic app. We're just sticking it in our document. And then the last thing we do is set that container, the one that had the templates. We set that to be visible by setting its style display to block. That just makes the whole thing visible, and that made it so that we didn't see a flash at the beginning, as it created a bunch of junk elements that it then read in as templates and then created our actual thing. We just want to display it at the end here. And this is just our test code. In production, we might do things a little bit different. But for instance, you might have these templates built on the server instead of actually having their code right here in the document, their HTML code. You could have a build system that just serves out the templates themselves as JavaScript, and that would be a better system for production. But for development, this way works great. So let's go to the code for to-do widget. That's again for this whole widget. We've got a to-do widget. We've also got to-do item. Here's the code for to-do item, which is for one of these components. So we'll start off with the widget. We have a constructor. We pass it a storage key. That's the string name of where we want to store its data and retrieve its data from. It will by default be to-dos if you don't set a storage key. If you don't provide one, we'll then load it from storage, which will fill in this items on the to-do widget. We have filters, all active completed. Those are these three filters here. They're lowercase, but other than that, we just create an object that has those in there, which is a member of to-do widget, and each of those is an empty object for now. They do get populated with the element, the button element, I believe, and you know, whatever else is needed, I guess, whether it's select. So cur filter is going to be either all active or completed. Notice that by default it's going to be all, but if we have a hash string, such as up here, if we have completed, so location hash will have a value in it, and we will use that value minus the hash symbol itself. That's why we do a substring here. Otherwise, we use all. So that's the constructor. I'm going to jump back and forth between these. To-do item also has a constructor. Now this, you pass in the item definition, which you can see here is just an object that has a name and it has a flag for whether it's been completed. That's a Boolean. It can also, if the Boolean's simply not there, if it's undefined, that's treated as false, and that's the way I prefer have it. It stores it just, it doesn't have completed equals true if it's not completed, making it a little bit more compact data. And we also pass in the parent widget. You'll notice when we create this, we'll jump in somewhere. Where does it actually create these guys? Probably down in load from storage. This is in to-do widget, load from storage, and here's where we actually call create a new object, a to-do list, and we pass it the item from the storage. Which will have the name and the flag for completed. And we'll pass in this, which is the to-do widget itself, so that it can reference so that each to-do item can reference its parent widget. So going back to item, here we are, we save the name, we save whether it's completed, completed equals true. it will simply be undefined if not true, and the parent widget. So next you'll notice that the to-do item has a render method. You'll also notice that the to widget has a render method. This isn't required, but it's just a convention I like to have for this sort of components. I also pass in the templates. You will notice that back here in the HTML file, when we loaded the templates with this thing, we have a variable called templates. I pass in the templates to the widget render method. And the widget render produces a string, which is then used we put that string in the element as its HTML. But the side effect of creating these elements from the string is that certain callbacks are going to be called, ones that are, when we use the templating, we can put callbacks on there so that we can get to the elements. Remember back in the HTML file, or in the HTML, we had these data utvars, and we want to have callbacks where those elements are provided to the JavaScript. So here's the render for a to-do item we call templates, which are passed in the templates. And there is a to-do item. Why is there a to-do item there? Because we have this template to-do item. So we call that function. We pass it an object that has a name in it. Why does it expect an object with a name in it? Going back to our HTML, it's because it had this # name within it. There's actually two of them. But whatever's passed in for that name, when we call the function, will go into both of these locations. And very efficiently so, I should add. So that creates the HTML with that one replacement. And then there is a callback. And it's a pretty big callback. It comes all the way down to here. The callback is passed in what I call E. It's a list of elements. It's an object. So e.main, e.killButton, e.input, e.label, e.checkbox. Did we see that already? All of those are passed in as elements, and that's because within our to-do item, we have all these kill button, input, checkbox, main, and they're all just defined as utvars, data utvars. So you can see what happens here, just plain old JavaScript. We handle the key down event. If it's an enter key, which is 13, we trim the value, we replace we actually re-render. We render the item again. This time, and it'll just be with its new parameters. We changed the name here because we hit enter. That's what happens if you edit here. It will come in here. The odd key down. It's an enter. Takes that, creates a new object, replaces it with that string, and those callbacks get called again in their new form. And we simply replace the previous element with the string for the new element, and this function here, replace node, does the right thing. Key code is 27, that's escape. We simply set it to editing null and synchronize. Now sync is used throughout here. Self-sync, that synchronizes this element with its internal properties. The external view of them gets set up. So you'll see self or this sync. It's self because we're down in these functions, so that because this changed. And we have various other stuff. So when I check the checkbox, this sets it as completed. And that's because of this onClick here. We call the parent widget to sync because that when you complete stuff, we have to make sure that all these other things are synchronized. If all of them are completed, it's going to change the appearance of this check. We're going to see it say 0 items. So I have to say parent widget sync. It goes and synchronizes the parent. Here's sync for the actual item. This has a pretty compact way of just setting the class name based on the filter, which is set in the parent. So if it's active, we will set the class name of the element. We're saying if the filter is active, we'll use this one, which means if the checkbox is checked, or if it's completed, which is C, we will set it hidden, otherwise we'll set the class to nothing. And we just have the logic here, which makes it do all the right appearance things. It either shows and hides the, I guess it doesn't really hide anything, but it sets the check. We set the checkbox. Here's where we set the checkbox checked, whether it's completed, and then we just set the class to completed, hidden, or nothing. And then we also append editing to it. If it's editing, that's if we're like this, we add the class editing, and it does the right thing. By virtue of the class, it makes this input element visible and makes everything else not visible. We have a couple other methods. Is completed. This is just so that the widget itself can call into an item and say, are you completed? And it will simply return its internal variable or false. This just is a little bit of encapsulation so that you're not messing around with the internal variables from outside this object. You could, if you really wanted, just reference the completed member directly. There's nothing preventing that. There's no private variables in JavaScript, and I haven't done anything to make them private. Haven't used any tricks to make it so you can't get it to it from the outside, but I prefer to use a method. Is completed, returns true or false, whether that item is currently completed. Set completed, you send it true or false, it will set it, and it will synchronize it. Remove element is another method that's kind of handy. It just removes the element from the parent on that to-do item. Notice that when you do this, you probably want to have the parent do it because it needs to know that it should no longer be in the list. You can't do that from within the to-do item. You have to do that from the widget, unless you're going to be calling the widget. So there are places where I talk to the parent widget get filter, parent widget is editing, but I do so through functions. I call parent widget sync, parent widget save to storage. Anytime we do something, for instance, on click, we set it to check, so I need to save it to storage because I need to know that that item is considered completed. And when I call save to storage, it just saves everything at once. I didn't bother saving individual items separately. There's no real need on a tiny app like this. Going to do widget. We've got our render method. It's a little bit, this one's a bit complex. It's calling several of the functions. One of them is, first we do the filter buttons and build a string. And we call template filter button. We give it a name, we give it a link. For instance, hash, like if it's completed, for this filter button here, that would have the link of hash completed, lowercase completed. Here for the name, we uppercase the first character and add that to all the other characters with a substring. And then, since this is the filter button, I get access to the button here in the element, and I get access to the I guess that's all we get. That's the only element there is. But we save that to our filters. So what you see up here, filters, all, it will have a member called button, and that button will, or button element, and that will have the element in it once the element's actually created. We set the onClick, and which sets the current filter, which would again be all active or completed, lowercase, and then we sync. We sync the whole thing. So sync is going to make these hidden or shown depending on whether what filter they are and whether they're completed or not. Here's where we actually call the to-do widget template itself. We pass in the string we created above, items, string, and filter buttons. Items string is the string for all the individual items. This is the string that represents all these items here, a string of HTML. Those are generated by calling the render method on the individual items, which of course does its own template work to generate them, but we already looked at that. So down here, here's where we create the footer. Footer is one of the templates, and it's got a lot of elements in it. It's got all these things here, so we have to hook up to them. The clear completed, the count element is this. And I think I moved that. And that's about it. When I call clear completed, notice I save it to storage, I synchronize the whole thing, I remove the elements from the array that I walk through the elements, find out if they're completed, the items, remove them if they are, and splice that element out of the array. Notice that I walk through in reverse order, because if you're altering the array, you don't want to do that while moving forward, and you'll shift things downward as you're walking forward. That's a bad idea. Here's the callback for the overall widget. I have the input element. That is this guy right here. We've got on key down. If it's 13, we want to trim it. And if it's a non-zero length thing, we want to create a new to-do item with the name that we got from here. So that's what happens here. Cut grass. I'm going to go over to all so that actually shows up. That's what happened here. We created a new to-do item. We appended it. We called sync, which in some cases will cause it to be hidden because of the filter. And of course we save that to storage so that if we refresh, cut grass will still be there. We've got our sync method, which again, it just synchronizes its external or its internal variables. It creates the external UI, makes sure that that's in sync. It's not doing this typically with strings. It's just altering class names and checking checkboxes and things like that. Here for the count element, this one's actually doing a template operation. For the count element, it will call this template's count, pass in the number, which is active, converts that to a string, and plural, that's going to be whether it has an S or not. If it's one, it's going to be, there's not going to be an S added to the word items. So you'll notice that that changes there. So that's just a simple template that generates that HTML. Since there are a couple spans in there, although you don't really see anything there, it made it easier to do it with a template. Not much to it. Let's go and look at that template. That would be the count. That's right here. So we've got the count. and we've got the plural tag, which is going to be an S or not an S. And then that's in a strong. That's kind of odd because it doesn't show up strong, but you would expect that to be the number to be bolder. It's set up so that you can do that, but they don't bother making it differently displayed. So I didn't make the CSS or styling for this. And moving on through the widget, we have some things load from storage. I think I pointed to this before. This just goes and gets the from local storage using our storage key. It parses the JSON and pushes those items into the array of the to-do widget items array. It pushes a new to-do item created from whatever was in local storage. So that's just called when it starts up. We also have save to storage that's called every time you do anything that changes the data. We call save to storage, and it will generate a little array having all that we need: the name, the completed, which could be undefined, which will basically not even get converted into a string. We will stringify it and save that as local storage with our storage key. So it's very, very simple, but it's also probably a little inefficient because it saves everything every time anything happens. But for something this small, it shouldn't make a difference. We have remove item. This is going to remove an item from it. It calls the item, you pass it an item, a to-do item, but the parent widget has to know how to remove it. It has to remove it from its array, splice that array, synchronize, and save to storage. But it also calls the items remove element, which actually removes the DOM element so that you don't see it anymore. Notice this. On modern browsers, you could do an array index of to find it in an array. Here we just walk through the array and look for it. Older browsers don't support that, but if you don't care about older browsers, you could make this ever so slightly cleaner. What else do we have? We have a get counts. This gets you the count of how many items left and how many items total. So return an object that has the all count, which here would be 4, and the completed count, which would be 2. That's important for rendering this little guy here, and also for deciding whether this little thing, which is technically a checkbox but has a different appearance, whether it's on or off, depending on the count. So notice that it's sensitive to the count. If the number of completed is equal to the total, it's going to be checked, otherwise it's not. We have get filter, which simply returns all active or completed. That's so that a child element, the to-do item, can get that filter so that it can decide whether to display itself or not. We don't access it directly, but we could. You could just call the parent widget.curFilter, but I prefer to have it call a method to get the filter. Set editing. This is setting whether or not one of these is in editing mode. And you just pass it the item that's in editing mode, that you want to be in editing mode, and it will set that as the global, or within, for the whole widget, that is the item that is being edited. You never want to have more than one, so it's not saved on the item itself. You save it within the widget. And then you just call synchronize, and it will do the right thing to the child elements to make them appear editing. So it seems a little convoluted, but it's the cleanest way of doing it, I think, to have it so that just the widget knows about which one is being edited. And it will be null if none of them are being edited. So, and then we have a function is editing, and you pass it an item and say, is this item actively being edited? Is this the one we've stored as the, and it just does a comparison of the one you pass in to whether this editing item, which, as I said, could be null, and it will return true or false, depending on whether that's true, whether it matches. So that's about it. I mean, you kind of have to look at all the little bits of code here, but there's not very much. Really, it's about as compact as any of the things on Todomvc, and it has very little library requirements, just one templating library, and not much more to it. All this is just vanilla JavaScript with nothing fancy, no jQuery, no backbone, no mustache, anything like that. So that's it. Thank you for watching.